What's up everyone, Lord MC, back with another Harmonic technical analysis update, where I will be covering in this video specifically the indices and some of the blue chip stocks that move the market, as we are at key important levels in the charts. So before I get into that, I want to preface by saying I am not a financial advisor. None of the things I say here or anywhere else is ever financial advice, so question everything, do your own research, and come out with your own conclusions. So having said that, let's jump right into the SPY here. SPY in the 1 day had a very interesting day. It went as high as 397.78, the low being 394.79 before finally closing the day at 395.49. I was mentioning earlier that if SPY lost 396.13, you could potentially start seeing a move to test back at 393.84. If I bring my drawings here, we did lose that level at 396.13. Specifically, I was looking at the 5-minute intraday, which was the level that it was hovering around, 396.13, which is noted by this horizontal yellow line. And it finally gave through here at towards the end of the day. It couldn't get past above, and it's currently just below after hours is currently just above that line, but we will see how that opens after futures and tomorrow in pre-market. One thing I do want to jump over and specifically cover is the 1 day chart here, because like I mentioned before, we are trading in this channel here. So this is creating higher highs and higher lows. So, and what I can expect specifically, in my opinion, I think we're going to see further downside. Why I say that? Because if this was to play out, we did look like we tested the top of this channel here, this trend line here, and we're not going to come down here. Why, in my opinion, we think possible downside, or I think it's possible downside, because I think, in my opinion, the markets are trying to trap bears once again, just like it did back here before the push up. Now, I could be wrong, but I'm looking at the level that it lost here. For me, that was 396.13, and it's now below that. And the next level of support is 390, where the 90 MA is. But I do have a level here, the past harmonic target one here from this bearish bat pattern that was generated back in June, where target one is at 393.84. So should it lose 393.84, we are going to come down to test 390. SPY also has a gap down between 385 and 381 that has yet to be filled. Now, not all gaps have to be filled, but in my opinion, for a perfect case scenario to trap bears, you would want to create a higher low. In this instance, it would be also where the bottom of this channel is, around 385, call it, right inside this gap. So should it come down, it might possibly fill that gap. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, maybe by the end of the week. Who knows? Maybe this continues its push down until next week. I don't know. But in my opinion, it does need to create a higher low for continuation to try to test back up against 400. Should it go down over here and feel this or touch this bottom of this channel here at 383, you enter the gap and maybe you bounce up again and you start trapping bears for the second, I guess this would be one move up, two. So the third attempt to touch the top of the channel here, and that would coincidentally be, if it's to happen next week, we test the top of this channel would be around 409, where there's also a gap up there between 403 and 409, and there's also this trend line here. This trend line that you see here is a 2008 trend line. So that lines up with the 200 SMA as well. It lines up with this gap up, and it also lines up with this top of this trend line, as well as the top of the descending broad new wedge. So I'm not saying that's going to happen after it hits the bottom, if it decides to hit the bottom, but I'm just assuming that in order for us to continue creating higher highs and higher lows, you need to come down, in my opinion. I'm looking at the volume. The volume is it's kind of a bit tricky to decide if that's what it's going to do. Could it bounce off of 390, which would be kind of where the midline is of this channel? Sure. And then continue back up? That could definitely happen. I don't know. But in a perfect case scenario, you would want to see a higher low, and that higher low would come down around 383, 385. So we will keep an eye on that. Something I want to do note, that on at least the 1 hour and and the 4 hour, you're starting to form head and shoulder patterns all across, right? So you are forming here left shoulder, the head, and then the right shoulder here. You kind of got stopped at the neckline. It didn't really do that push down. So right here, for example, on the SPY, you have a bearish ABCD pattern, which is just slightly hovering below ABCD here at 397.32. It's holding strong on that line here that I have below that line at 396.13. So if you lose that, that's also where the 50 EMA is. You can come all the way down to target 2 at 385.67. Obviously, you're not going to come down like that in one quick drop. You're obviously going to have levels of support, and one of those support lines would be for me is 393.84, then 390.19, and then you could possibly see 385. So you are having bearish patterns all across the board, especially on the macro here. You can tell on the 4 hour, you lost 398 XA off of this bearish deep crab, and the next target would be a target 1 at 383. 382.37. So right now it's trying to see if it's going to do a type 1 or a type 2 reaction, and in my opinion, it's possibly looking like it wants to do a type 1, but you'll definitely have to keep an eye out on that too, because you could tell here the 4 hours also forming what looks like a head and shoulders. Now all these patterns did not have to play out, but it's interesting to see, and we should definitely keep an eye out on that. Jumping over to the NASDAQ here. Remove some of my drawings. The NASDAQ did finish at minus 1.36% for the day, went as high as 289.48, low being 284.60 before closing at 285.44. Just like the SPY, it also has the same 3 candles as the SPY. You did fall below target 1 here at 289.07. So the next level of support, should you continue pushing down, would be right where the 50 EMA is here at 280. You lose that, you have some support here between 280 and 277. 277, you lose this, you're going to come back down, possibly to test XA here at 265.05, and maybe back again to hop at 256.86, should it start doing a type 2 reaction. Like the SPY here, this is also creating, let me remove these lines here. It's also creating higher highs and higher lows. So if this was to come back down tomorrow, this would create a perfect higher low somewhere around this range between 276 and 280. We will have to keep an eye on that. I do have a line here. Should it lose 276.86 on the NASDAQ, you could potentially start looking at filling the gap down between 273.82 and 268.90, somewhere around there. So just like the SPY, it also has head and shoulders forming on the hour and as well as up to the 4 hour. So we will see if those are playing out. I think there is some harmonics here on the 2 hour. Yep, right here there's an alt bat here. It looked like it did its type 2 reaction, and it's now maybe doing its type 1. So on the NASDAQ, you lose 285, you come down, test the 50 EMA on the 2 hour at 282, 281, 281, you come down to 274. So definitely keep an eye on the NASDAQ. I'm going to jump over here to the Dow Jones. As I mentioned before, the Dow Jones, out of the 3 indices, did its move to test the top of the descending broadening wedge and broke out. Now, it went as high as 240. Right now, it's hovering around 236.07 where it closed. And just like the other indices, it's doing the same thing. There is a gap down here between 330, 331, and 330. It's a small gap. It's 331, 330.94 call it, and 331.85. So it's also has creating higher highs and higher lows. This one broke. This is a little bit difficult to say because the volume did decrease to the is decreasing to the buy side. So out of all 3 indices, in my opinion, the Dow Jones is the one that's overextended. So like the SPY and the NASDAQ, it's also creating here. That's 4 hour 4 hour crab, where it's hovering around 335.13. Should it lose 335.13, you're going to possibly fill that gap. Lose that gap, you're going to go to 330 and then back down to 324, in which case you will be maybe finding support at the top of the descending broadening wedge, If you lose that, you re-enter the descending broadening wedge. So coming back to 324, you're going to come down to finish maybe a type 1 reaction. Doesn't have to go that way, but I'm just saying if it decides to push down, it will be something to note, as because the Dow Jones is one of the first indices that makes this move first, and the others follow. One thing I do want to note, real quick, if I go to the SPY here, if the if the Dow Jones was the first to make its move to test its top of descending broadening wedge, and the SPY and the Nasdaq have yet to done that, then in my opinion we do push back up above to test where is this, 409, maybe gap fill, maybe test 411, or get rejected back down at around 417, should the SPY and the Nasdaq do the same movement that the Dow Jones did. I don't think that's going to happen, in my opinion. It's just if the Dow Jones is going to continue down, it's going to also continue pushing the Nasdaq and the SPY. But let's entertain the fact that if it does decide to go above the descending broadening wedge, you can get rejected and you can come back down as well. And then later down the line, fill this gap. You don't have to fill this gap now, but in my opinion, it's better to fill this gap should we get a push to the downside, and then start looking in the future to possibly test those 400 levels. But we will see. Jumping over to the VIX. So the VIX here has it's hard to chart the VIX, but it is forming an inverse head and shoulders, and it's right now starting to form its right shoulder. I'm not saying it's going to complete that pattern, but we're definitely tracking this bat pattern off a daily here, where the VIX did close at 24.10. If it does get in the $25 range, then you kind of consider maybe that it'll start to move up here to test 27, target 1, and then a target 2 at $30.10. It did obviously now want to come down to fill that gap below, which is around $21. But it's interesting to see what that's going to play out. We have the jobless claims tomorrow that come out, so who knows what the data reports will say. In which case, if they are bullish, then we come back down. If it is bearish, then we come back up and the market comes down. Jumping over here to Apple. So Apple on the daily has this bullish bat pattern, where it essentially looks like it's creating a double top here, and you're going to come down. The neckline would be somewhere around, I guess here, 134. But just like the SPY is creating higher highs and higher lows, it looks exactly like the SPY as well. Something to note here that I have is this 148.05 key level here, where Apple did close just above that at 148.79 today. But if you lose that level here, you're gonna have your last level of support between 145, call it 145, 146, and then if you lose that level of support, you're gonna come down real quick to test XA at 138.60. In my opinion, Apple, out of most of the blue chip stocks, is one of the tickers that have yet to capitulate as much as, let's say, for example, Tesla, Microsoft, Google, Amazon. So we definitely have to keep an eye out on that, because this is getting very tight here for Apple. All the EMAs here, the 50, the 9, the 21, the 13, are all bunching up together as support here, getting very close. So if it's going to trap bears, if the market is trying to trap bears, this would be up in the long term, right? You have this level of support, break this level of support and continue down, make bears happy for short term, and then essentially wait out and find the the higher low, and then continue pushing up. So 148.05, definitely a key level to watch out for. Should it not go that way, the next level you want to go above is definitely 150.33. And then, in my opinion, the most bullish case scenario for Apple, if you're going long, you definitely want to enter 153.10. As soon as you enter 153.10, you tend to spike up really hard to test the top of the this trading range at 155.78. Just like it did back here, went straight up all the way up to 156, right here as well. It went almost up to 155. But yeah, we will see if that is to happen. Should Apple lose here 146.05, you can possibly start looking to fill the gap down there at where XA is at 130, 138.60. Moving over to Microsoft. Microsoft here did close below my line here. The very important line that I have is at 242.50. It just seems to fail every time it tries to go above, just like it did back here in October the 24th. It kind of retested it here, broke up, retested, and then failed at the top of the 50 SMA here. So it is having a hard time staying above 242. Should it decide to push to the upside, and if you're going long, you definitely want to be above 242.50, in which case you want continuation to test target 1 at 256.12 and then 262, possibly 278 down the line. But just like everything else as well, I'm going to be saying this, a lot of these blue chip stocks are creating higher highs and higher lows. It's getting very tight as well for Microsoft here. Should you lose the 50 EMA here at 240, 240.70, 240.91, you have all these EMAs bunching up together. So the last level of support that I would have for Microsoft is somewhere around 237, between 237 and 235. You come down and possibly fill this gap between 235 and 228. And like everything else, it's also forming head and shoulder patterns everywhere. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that right here. This is the left shoulder here. Let me bring out this brush drawing real quick. You got a left shoulder, you got a head, and then you could possibly form. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if it is, it's would play out nicely for the short term. It'd be kind of bad, but for long term, if we're looking at the SPY to continue testing 400, it'll be good thing long term. But we definitely keep an eye on that. We have also on the 1 hour, I believe, bearish patterns. Not bearish patterns here, but you could tell that Microsoft has yet to do a type 2 reaction off this 1 hour deep crab. But wanted to jump over here. What was it? 2 hour. Yeah, so this is a very key level here on Microsoft, 242.50. So we will see if that plays out tomorrow and into the end of the week. Jumping over to Tesla. So Tesla's been having a rough week, rough month actually. You got decrease in volume. You ended up closing the day at 186.92. You're having a hard time getting above the 90 EMA here at 195. So if I jump over here to the 2-day, the 2-day has this bullish Gartley pattern, and where it lost XA today at 188.03. Should you continue pushing down, you're going to possibly test 178. We did close on the weekly for Tesla below the 200 EMA. If you continue pushing down, the next level of support would be the 200 SMA at 161. If I go over to the 1 day real quick. Yeah, on the 1 day it's bear flagging, right? So if it loses that, this is kind of concerning for Tesla. Could potentially start seeing 150 down the line. But yeah, you lose 188. Excuse me, 178. You're gonna come back down to test 160s right here on the weekly 200 SMA. Yeah, 160.09, somewhere around there. So if we do see further pain tomorrow and into the week, and if my thesis is correct about we're going to come back down short term, then I don't think Tesla's done capitulating here. It looks very, very, very weak. Volume is starting to decrease a little bit, but you still got room on the RSI to come further down. One thing I wanted to cover here was Amazon. So Amazon has this bullish bat pattern here. It did close at $97.12 for today, just above hop at $96.31. There is a gap down at $90, around $90 and 91 and change. So we got an HSI arrow trigger today to the downside, which meant that the HSI was overbought. You still have room for the RSI. It's still in the midline, so you'll definitely keep an eye out on that. Should it lose hop, you're going to come possibly test that gap down, and losing that gap down here at $90, you have this level here at 88.09, where if it loses that, you're going to probably come down to 81.23. Should Amazon continue pushing to the upside, the next level of resistance you will find would be at the 21 EMA here at 97, and 100, almost at 101. If you get above that, you're going to possibly fill this gap here up between 104 and 110, which is where XA is at 107.54. I know they had released news that they were laying off 10,000 workers. I don't know if that was already priced in, but do see further downside on all the blue chip stocks if my thesis continues to push to the downside. I wanted to cover Google as well. So Google, out of the blue chip stocks, is one. It's very bullish to me. It's on increase in volume, so the volume is harmonic here. It's hard to say if it's going to do a type 1 reaction. The type 1 reaction would bring it up to 103 and 50 cents. It is hovering above the 50 EMA here at 98.85. Should it start creating higher lows, you're going to come back down. In my opinion, that higher low would be around, if you lose the 50 EMA, you're looking at around $94.43. Should you lose that, you're going to come down to XA at 92.72, come back down to hop at 84.79, possibly enter that gap and fill it at $83. So it is a little bit, I think it's overextended on the 4 hour. Yeah, so on the 4 hour, you got this bearish bat pattern where it tested hop. So it's hovering around the 200 EMA. You lose that, you're possibly coming down to 95.46, and then 91.69 and 88.46 down the line. So we will keep an eye out on that. And I think I covered all those, all the blue chip stocks that I was gonna cover. So yeah, that's all I have for you guys. I will be streaming tomorrow. I know it was a short stream today, but I will be on tomorrow 15 minutes before open. So if you want to follow me on that, we'll be streaming on Twitch. You can find the link to my Twitch on the description box. And if you like this type of content, please consider giving me a like and subscribe to the channel. It does help me out. But other than that, that's all I have for you guys. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and see you guys tomorrow. Peace.